Everyone believed the family heirloom had been stolen. Accusations flew, trust shattered, and the warmth of the home turned cold. But while voices rose and suspicions grew, Shadow, the loyal golden retriever, kept pawing at the same old rug in the center of the living room. Day after day, he scratched, barked, and stared, as if urging them to listen. What lay beneath that rug would not only clear every false suspicion, but also restore something far more valuable than silver: the bond of family and the reminder that sometimes a dog sees the truth long before we do. Robert, a 55-year-old man with a square, weathered face, a faint scar above his left brow, hazel eyes, and short salt and pepper hair, discovered the family's silver locket was gone. His scruffy beard twitched as he muttered in disbelief, while Martha, his wife, pressed a hand to her chest in shock. Their daughter Anna whispered suspicions about the neighbors, while Mark, their son, accused a cousin. Voices rose quickly. The old wooden house, usually calm, filled with tension. Yet in the corner, Shadow, their 10-year-old golden retriever, golden fur glistening in the sunlight, scratched gently at the patterned rug, tail flicking with intent. Robert paced the wooden floor, boots striking hard as he clenched his fists. His hazel eyes darted from Anna to Mark, searching for guilt. Martha begged for calm, but Anna's voice sharpened as she accused, while Mark shouted back, his face red with anger. The family's unity frayed like a rope pulled too tight. Yet Shadow remained undisturbed by the shouting. The dog lowered his grey-muzzled face to the rug, paws digging rhythmically at one corner, his brown eyes fixed on something unseen. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, cutting across the dust in the air, illuminating his persistence like a clue. For 3 days, Shadow returned to the same spot. Morning and night, his claws scratched the fabric, his nose pressing to the edge, his ears perked with stubborn focus. Robert grew irritated, shoving him gently aside. "Not now, boy," he muttered, weary lines deepening on his face. But the dog always returned, golden coat glowing in the sunlight, collar jingling softly as he resumed his work. Martha began to wonder aloud, her voice low and hopeful. "What if he's trying to show us something?" Her words hung in the room, fragile yet powerful, as the family's doubts clashed with loyalty's call. Robert crouched beside Shadow, frustration etched into his scarred brow. His strong hands pushed the dog gently away, but Shadow circled back immediately, paws scraping louder, tail stiff with urgency. Anna and Mark's argument grew sharper, their words like daggers in the small living room. Martha clasped her hands together, her worried gaze shifting between her children and the determined dog. Dust rose in tiny clouds as Shadow scratched harder, sunlight catching each floating speck. The warmth of the afternoon light clashed with the cold suspicion in the family's hearts, while the dog remained the only one pointing toward truth. Martha knelt beside Shadow, her floral dress brushing the wooden floor. She stroked his golden fur gently, her hands trembling with both fear and hope. Shadow's brown eyes met hers with unwavering loyalty, his grey muzzle pressed against the rug as his paws tapped insistently. Robert stood behind them, arms crossed, hazel eyes shadowed with doubt, his faded checkered shirt wrinkled at the seams. "He knows something," Martha whispered, her voice almost breaking. For the first time, silence filled the room. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the curtains, glowing across the rug as if urging the family to finally listen. The room erupted again. Anna pointed a trembling finger at Mark, her voice sharp with anger. Mark's face flushed red, his fists clenched as he shouted back. Robert's hazel eyes narrowed, his scarred brow furrowing deeply as he raised his hand, demanding silence. His faded checkered shirt clung to his shoulders as tension thickened in the air. Yet while voices battled, Shadow kept scratching at the rug, his claws clicking against the wooden floor beneath the fabric. Tail raised, muzzle grey but determined, the dog's persistence drowned out the accusations, as if urging them to look closer and finally see. Robert collapsed into his worn wooden chair, the weight of suspicion heavy on his broad shoulders. His rough hand covered his weary face, scruffy beard brushing against his palm. Martha stood behind him, wringing her hands anxiously, while Anna and Mark glared at one another in silence. On the floor, Shadow stretched out beside the rug, golden fur glowing softly in the daylight. Though lying down, his brown eyes never left the corner of the patterned fabric. His tail flicked slowly, ears twitching as if waiting for permission. The quiet was suffocating, but Shadow's steady gaze whispered of hidden truths. Suddenly, Shadow barked, sharp and clear, his voice echoing against the old walls. Everyone froze. Robert's hazel eyes shot open, his scar catching the golden sunlight. Martha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Anna and Mark turned from their anger to stare at the dog, their expressions shifting from defiance to confusion. Shadow pawed furiously at the rug, dust lifting in tiny clouds, his leather collar jingling with each movement. Robert rose slowly from his chair, his faded checkered shirt creased with strain. The bark had broken the tension, replacing it with something heavier, the undeniable presence of mystery. Robert knelt on the wooden floor, his scarred brow drawn tight as he reached toward the rug. His strong hands, calloused from years of labor, gripped the faded fabric with caution. Shadow stood firmly at his side, golden coat bright in the daylight, grey muzzle lowered close to the corner, ears alert. Martha leaned forward, eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope, her voice caught in her throat. Anna and Mark edged closer, their earlier anger forgotten. As Robert lifted one edge, dust spilled out, sunlight illuminating the fibers. Something beneath resisted, waiting to be uncovered at last. The rug peeled back with a groan, sliding across the wooden floor. Beneath it, the floorboards lay dusty and worn, one slightly misaligned. Robert's hazel eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat, beard damp with sweat. Shadow barked again, standing proudly, his tail wagging with purpose. Martha pressed her hands together, whispering prayers under her breath. Anna and Mark leaned in, their faces pale with disbelief. The golden afternoon light streamed through the curtains, casting long beams across the exposed wood. For the first time, suspicion gave way to silence, the family united by one undeniable question. What lay below? Robert leaned closer, his scarred brow furrowed, hazel eyes fixed on the uneven floorboard. With a rough hand, he brushed away dust, the wood creaking beneath his touch. His faded checkered shirt stretched tight as he crouched lower, boots pressing firmly into the floor. Shadow stood beside him, golden coat glowing, grey muzzle hovering near the crack, ears twitching as if confirming something hidden there. Martha stepped forward nervously, her breath quick and shallow. Anna and Mark remained frozen behind, their arguments silenced. The afternoon light highlighted Robert's trembling fingers as they traced the edge of the mysterious board. Robert exhaled heavily and reached for a small iron tool from the drawer nearby. His calloused fingers wrapped around it firmly, his canvas watch slipping slightly on his wrist. Kneeling again, he pressed the tool's edge into the gap, sweat forming along his scarred brow. Shadow waited faithfully at his side, tail stiff, collar jingling as he shifted closer, golden fur glowing. Martha clutched her dress tightly, lips trembling as she whispered, "Be careful." The old wood groaned as Robert pried gently. Sunlight streamed across the floor, dust dancing in the glow, while the secret fought to remain buried. The wood cracked, splinters flying as Robert pulled harder, his rugged face set in determination. His hazel eyes widened when the board began to shift, revealing a narrow black line beneath. Martha gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Shadow pushed his nose closer, paws braced on the floor, tail wagging as if encouraging Robert forward. Anna and Mark leaned in, their earlier anger now forgotten in stunned silence. The air thickened, dust floating in golden beams of sunlight. With one final effort, Robert pried the board upward, the room holding its breath as the darkness beneath revealed itself. Robert lifted the loose plank fully, his scarred brow furrowed, sweat trickling down his weathered face. The hollow beneath gaped like an open wound in the wooden floor, dust rising in a thick cloud. Shadow lowered his head into the gap, sniffing furiously, his grey muzzle brushing the edges, ears perked in alert excitement. Martha clutched her chest, whispering prayers, her eyes wide with fear and awe. Anna and Mark stood shoulder to shoulder for the first time, their expressions tense. Sunlight poured across the cavity, its golden light clashing with the dark void that had been hidden for so long. Robert's strong hands reached into the hollow, fingers brushing against something hard and unfamiliar. His hazel eyes widened as he pulled free a small wooden box covered in thick dust and cobwebs. His faded checkered shirt and brown trousers were coated with grime as he set it down gently on the floor. Shadow wagged his tail slowly, brown eyes shining with triumph, his leather collar glinting in the sunlight. Martha's lips trembled as she whispered, "All this time." Anna and Mark inched closer, their faces pale with anticipation. The sunlight illuminated the box, fragile yet filled with untold secrets. Robert sat back on his heels, the dusty wooden box heavy in his calloused hands. His hazel eyes narrowed, scar above his brow deepening as he brushed off layers of grime. The faded checkered shirt clung to his broad shoulders, brown trousers streaked with dust, boots planted firmly on the wooden floor. Shadow leaned close, golden fur shining in the sunlight, grey muzzle sniffing eagerly at the box, tail wagging once as if to say, "You've found it." Martha knelt beside Robert, her hands trembling. Anna and Mark stood silently behind. The entire room seemed to lean toward the truth. Robert turned the box slowly in his hands, the old canvas watch on his wrist catching the golden light. Faded carvings etched into the wood emerged through the dust, strange yet familiar. His weathered face hardened, hazel eyes filled with recognition. Martha whispered, "Do you know it?" But his silence was answer enough. Shadow sat tall beside him, ears perked, brown eyes steady, golden fur glowing in the afternoon sun. Anna and Mark exchanged uncertain glances, their suspicion giving way to awe. Dust motes swirled around the room, the air thick with history, as if the house itself held its breath. Robert placed the box gently on the floor, fingers pressing against the old clasp. His scarred brow furrowed, his rough beard brushing his chest as he bent lower. Martha crouched beside him, her floral dress grazing the dusty boards. Shadow leaned forward, nose brushing the box, tail stiff, leather collar snug against his neck. Robert inhaled deeply, hazel eyes locked on the lid, and pulled. The hinge creaked, releasing a breath of stale air. Sunlight caught the moment, spilling across the wooden floor as the family crowded closer, hearts pounding in unison, waiting to see what years of silence concealed. The box opened with a groan, its contents glinting faintly through the dust. Robert's rough hands trembled as he lifted a silver locket, tarnished but still beautiful, resting in his palm. His hazel eyes widened, scar catching the light as a rush of relief softened his rugged face. Martha gasped, her hand to her lips, tears forming. Shadow barked once, sharp and triumphant, tail wagging as his golden coat shimmered. Anna and Mark leaned in, disbelief painted across their pale faces. Sunlight spilled warmly over the family, the locket sparkling like a bridge between doubt, hope, and long-awaited truth. Robert held the locket high, his arms trembling, canvas watch glinting on his wrist. His square, weathered face softened with emotion, hazel eyes shimmering. Martha stepped closer, pressing her hands to her chest, relief glowing in her kind features. Shadow sat proudly at Robert's side, golden fur brilliant, grey muzzle noble, leather collar gleaming in the warm sunlight. Anna and Mark edged nearer, their anger dissolved, eyes wide with wonder. For the first time in days, the room fell into silence, not of suspicion, but of awe. The locket had returned, but what it restored was something far greater. Trust. Robert's hazel eyes glistened as he turned the silver locket over in his rough hands. The scar above his brow caught the sunlight, his rugged square face softening for the first time in days. Martha stepped closer, tears welling as she touched the locket gently. Shadow sat beside Robert, golden fur glowing, grey muzzle noble, tail sweeping the wooden floor, his brown eyes calm and proud. Anna and Mark hovered near, guilt written across their young faces. The sunlight streaming through lace curtains bathed the room in golden warmth, wrapping the family in a fragile but healing silence. Martha dropped to her knees, throwing her arms around Robert. His faded checkered shirt wrinkled beneath her embrace, his strong arms wrapping tightly around her shoulders. His scarred brow eased as hazel eyes closed in gratitude. Shadow leaned against Martha's side, grey muzzle brushing her dress, golden coat shimmering in the light, collar snug around his neck. Anna wiped tears from her cheeks, her voice breaking into quiet sobs. Mark shifted uneasily, shame flickering in his eyes. The sun spilled through the window, soft and forgiving, while the family clung together in a moment of love that words could not capture. Robert rose slowly, his square face still lined but softened by relief. Hazel eyes gentle as he placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. "We've all been wrong," he said quietly, the scar above his brow catching the golden light. Mark's head dropped, his fists unclenching as guilt melted into tears. Anna stepped forward, embracing her brother, her long hair falling across his shoulder. Shadow lay between them, golden fur glowing, tail thumping steadily, brown eyes shining with peace. Martha watched, her hands clasped in prayer. The locket rested safely on the table, gleaming under the warm embrace of the sun. The family gathered on the wooden floor, their circle complete. Robert sat cross-legged, his faded checkered shirt dusty, trousers creased, boots scuffed, but his hazel eyes calm at last. Martha leaned against him, Anna and Mark sitting nearby, their faces softened and free of anger. Shadow stretched out at Robert's feet, head resting on his paws, grey muzzle serene, golden fur glowing in the sunlight. The silver locket lay between them on the table, no longer a cause for suspicion, but a symbol of unity. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, painting the room in gentle gold, peace finally restored. Robert knelt beside Shadow, his scarred brow faintly lit, hazel eyes filled with gratitude. One strong, weathered hand rested on the dog's head, fingers sinking into golden fur. Shadow sat proudly, tail wagging slowly, grey muzzle lifted with quiet dignity, his brown leather collar shining in the afternoon glow. Behind them, Martha smiled softly, Anna and Mark standing together at last, their bond healed. The patterned rug lay rolled aside, the floorboard replaced, the locket resting safely in its box. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, bathing the family in warmth. The truth had been found, thanks to a faithful friend.